Hello, bonjour. As I said in my previous video, if you saw it, I'm now going to just have a quick chat with you about how we let our Gite and things like that. And excuse me if I keep looking what looks like away from you, it's because I'm looking at the screen and not at the little camera over this side. Right, so people ask me, could you do a video about letting your Gite? Well, it's difficult to know exactly what you want to know, so I'm just going to literally just talk through it. We decided to let the Gite once, well, we sort of talked about it a bit before we moved over, but mainly once we were here, we decided that we needed to let it, because when we first come over, we were obviously, one of the big concerns is what money are we going to live off? How are we going to get any money? Personally, I was fairly confident because Duncan's an electrician and he's also a very good DIY person. He can turn his hand to most things. So if we've got really desperate, we'd be able to earn some money somehow. However, you must be registered to do a lot of these things and you need to be able to prove it. DIY, not necessarily so much, but you do need to have to be able to prove what you do. Now, Duncan was always an excellent electrician in the UK. I know I'm his wife, but I know he was just because I know what his reputation was in the UK and how people were going to miss him when he'd gone. So, talking to people before we come over, we found that they were saying you won't have any problem getting your work, Duncan, because they really need electricians. And especially English electricians, because as you can imagine with electrics, it's quite a technical thing and people need to have things explained to them, and also the clients need to be able to explain what they want, and so with the language barrier it can be a little bit difficult. So they do need English electricians, although Duncan did and still does want to work for French because we live in a French country and he wants to prove his worth with the French as well. Anyway, once we got here, we were working on this house and finishing this off. We had been working on it obviously before we moved, but we had to finish off once we were here, and we were doing bits and pieces next door in the other house and in here, but especially once we thought, right, well, once we move into next door, we need to be letting this because we don't really know how work is going to go, and we need to get advertising on holiday sites to try and get some guests. So we got it finished, managed to get photos out on some holiday sites, and then we did very quickly actually get a few guests, and the first guest was due about a year almost to the day of us moving here. So we're lucky we'd done what we'd done and also made next door livable. So you can imagine the pressure. I mean, on the day that the guest was arriving, we were still finishing off bits and pieces in here, so it was a bit nerve-wracking. We were done within hours of them arriving. We'd managed, while we were still living in here, to get ourselves registered. I at the time was cleaning other people's holiday homes and Gites, the holiday homes, just they wanted it prepared before they come over, and if they got, and other times it would be because they've got clients going to stay and they needed me to prepare it. There's a lot of women here that do this now. There's a lot of Gites here as well, which immediately you feel the pressure thinking, oh, it's too much competition, but it's I think because strangely enough, because we're in the north of France and it's quicker to get to than going to the south of France, very often people want to come here just because it's less travel. And also they can stop here on the way down to the south of France. So, yeah, so we haven't done too badly. So, we moved into next door. Before we moved out here, out of this house, Duncan had actually had some work booked, so that slowed down the progress of next door a bit, because obviously even though it was livable, but he needed to earn the money, because at this point we'd got to the point where we had about €100 in the bank, and it was almost panic station. So he was very fortunate that he had work come through. So from the start, we initially, I think our first people we advertised with was a company called Home Away, and then we were looking at TripAdvisor. And you start looking, and the more you look, the more you start to realise all of these holiday sites come under the same umbrella. They're all owned by the same people. So then you start to think, well, what's the point? I think it was a few years before we decided we would give Airbnb a go, because just as it says Airbnb, we thought you wouldn't be able to advertise with them because we're not a B&B and never would be. But then you start to realise that hotels are on there. You can't really call them B&Bs, but they're hotels, and other people are advertising basically anywhere that lets their house or their place for people to stay in. So I thought, well, let's go for that, and never looked back really. We've had most of our guests initially came from Home Away, but now we hardly get anybody from Home Away. It's all from Airbnb, and I think people like it because it's such a good site. It's well laid out. They protect you and they protect the homeowner, as in us, from all of this sort of thing. They deal with taking all the money. You haven't got to worry about that. And we've only ever had to ask once for money from a guest because of something that happened here, and it was, even then, it was more the principle of the matter than what had happened, because what happened was we had some workmen stay, and obviously it's a no smoking gite, but not only did this person smoke in the gite, they smoked in the bedroom and burnt a hole in the sheet. So you can imagine my horror when I saw this, because to me that was so disrespectful as well. So we did complain to the company, and we got some money back for basically to replace the sheet. So yeah, but other than that, we've never made a claim. Most of our guests are excellent. You get the odd few, and you think they're pushing the luck a little bit, but then they're on holiday, aren't they? So I mean, yeah, briefly over the years, I mean, we had a client that turned up. There were a family, 2 adults, 2 children, and turned up with 2 dogs. Now, this is only a small place, as you'll see when you've walked around with me. We always said we could only have a small dog, but then you would have to ask us about whether they could bring the dog, because we needed to check on the size of it and everything. But these were 2 dogs that we didn't know about, and we were put on a spot that day because obviously we hadn't basically said they could bring them. And it turned out that these particular guests were one of our worst guests. Not horrifically, but obviously we were immediately annoyed because they brought the dogs and shouldn't have done. The husband was a chef. He's so obviously always got someone cleaning up after him, because this kitchen was filthy when they left. The top of the stove was swimming in oil, and this obviously annoyed us. Obviously, we didn't find this out obviously until they'd left. We don't insist on inspecting while the guest's here, because it makes them feel uncomfortable and us, not necessarily. And because we say you'll get your deposit back within 14 days, there's time to look around. There's time also to find things that might have been hidden. A friend of ours, they had guests saying the children were quite unruly, and they would be jumping up and down on the sofa and that. And when they'd gone, about a week later, when they were preparing for another guest, they found they'd actually snapped the sofa. Now, they wouldn't have found this immediately. So these are why you give 14 days after, to give you that time to basically find things. And also, for me, I ask guests not to strip the bed, because as much as it's a nice thing to do, saves me doing it, once it's all bunched up, should there be any stains on the sheet or anything like that, I won't know unless I go through and inspect everything, which can be a real pain. If it's on the bed, I can see it. and then I know what, if there's a stain, what to deal with. I've got to try and rid the sheets of this stain. So yeah, so that's what I do. But even the guests that left recently, I mean, the half of the family that stayed in one bed stripped the bed, but the one down in this bed down here didn't. But I mean, it's very rare that we get stains on it. And quite often we've come in and found the bed linen drying, and we said, well, why are you washing it? What's the point? You get suspicious, and they said, no, well, so and so was sick on it, or this, and they wash it before they go. They don't leave us to do it, so it's kind of them to do that. Now let's think what else you want to know. Again, I said in the other video, you need, when you are letting a sheet here, you need to inform the mayoree, that you're going to do this, and they're not that bothered, because if anything, you're bringing people into this little town and they're going to spend money in the bar or in the shop and things like that. So, and it's good for the area, but you still need to inform them, and you need to get a number so that they've got a number to refer you by. So that's what the certificate is up in the room that I showed on the film. Once you've done that, you need to be registering it's a business after all. You have to register that with your tax people, because you obviously need to be paying tax on it, as you would anywhere in any business. We used to let only in the summer, because you sort of go by what other people do, and we found that people weren't letting through the winter because it was too much on the electricity, and too much work sometimes to do. But after a while you start to think, well, actually it's better that you just let all year round, because you still get people that want to stay out of season, as it were. You still get people like workmen and that want to see, or people that are visiting family that aren't necessarily bothered about the weather. So we decided just open it up all year round. And then you have to start considering cost of electricity, heating, and all that sort of thing. So naturally, you will pay more, but with most holiday people, you will pay more in the summer, and they will charge a premium, and it's just always been that way. But the winter will always be cheaper. Now, I suppose if you're a big company, you can offset that. The money you're making in the summer, you can let it be cheaper in the winter, but it doesn't work like that with us. So we decided that initially we were more expensive, because it's naturally what happens in the summer. Naturally more expensive in the summer than the winter. But now in the end we decided, well, in the summer, especially like us, you've got an AC unit running sometimes, and they're as expensive as running a heater, as I'm sure you know. So we decided in the end, running the AC unit is probably around the same cost as heaters during the winter. So we just do the same price the whole year round, and at the moment we charge $65 a night, and then if it's a full week they get a 1 day free. So that works fine, and I think people do find us very reasonable. And I think the fact that they've got a whole house to use and not just an apartment, and obviously when the weather's good they get a garden to use as well. It may be that it's not attached, but most of the time that doesn't bother people, because they like the little walk down there and it's quiet. And that price is very often the same as a hotel would charge just for a room. So it's a no-brainer really. And some people, what they like is the fact, as people know, most people that have got Gites, their guests like the fact they can come and go as they want. They can stay in if they want. There's nothing worse to me, personally, being in a hotel and there's nowhere to go other than the lobby in a hotel, or round the pool maybe. At least when the weather's bad, you've got somewhere you can relax. And I think more and more people are starting to realise that. Yeah, I mean, we supply a welcome pack of salts. If they're only staying for 2 or 3 nights, then they'll get a bottle of cider or a bottle of wine, usually both be a local produce. If they're staying a bit more, they might get a bottle of wine and a baguette. And if they're staying for the week, then they'll get sort of more like a full basket, and that'll be like bread, butter, cheese, milk, Obviously, to say tea and coffee are always on supply anyway. At least for the first few days, they can at least come in and have a drink. Then, what else is it? So so that's bread, cheese, butter, milk. Sometimes we might give them jam, and then we'll also then get a bottle of cider and a bottle of wine. It's very rare though now. I don't know if it's down to cost, but most people don't stay for a week. So we don't very often do that, but yeah. So that's what we do, and people usually it's unexpected, to the point of they'll turn up with their own bread and things because they don't know it's going to be here, and it's got to the point now that I think might have to tell them, because somewhere along the line something's getting wasted, and it's gutting really, because we like to surprise them, and they usually are really surprised. If there's any food left over that we've supplied, it's very often it'll be the French. For some reason, I don't know if they don't like what we're leaving out, or because they bought their own it's got left. If it's wine or cider, they might not drink. And this is all a gamble, because you don't know if they drink, do you, before they come? Yeah, but the only thing I would... So we had one guest who stayed, and they bought a ton of food. They were workmen, and they'd left a day earlier than expected, but what they left was about 4 days worth of food. But they didn't just leave it out and say, well, make use of it, would you like it? They put it in the bin, and you can imagine, now obviously we had to sort that because of recycling, so we found it. Don't usually have to, but you knew by what was in the bag that it wasn't recyclable stuff. So it was a bit frustrating that there was all this food that could have been used. I don't know why they didn't just cook it and take it with them or something. It's just wasteful. Maybe they're subsidised by their company for food, so they weren't worried. I don't know. But generally, if people are going to go and there's something they don't want to take with them or can't take with them, they'll leave it in a bag on the table and for us, or they'll knock on the door and say, like, can you use this? And it's lovely. Quite very often we will get presents from the guests as well. The last guest that left, actually, I've just found a pair of socks left in the cupboard, which is not a first. We've had lots of clothes left behind before, and they really don't want to be paying the postage to have it delivered to them, so it stays. One guest actually left a baby's sort of first aid kit, as it were. There was a thermometer in there and some other baby things all in this kit, and again it was going to cost more to post it than it was actually worth. So you do acquire things sometimes. But also this guest had broken what she called a ramekin, but it was just a little bowl. It's not what I would call a ramekin, and she just left some money for it to replace it. And when they do things like that, it's lovely. It's so respectful. Obviously, classic thing is breaking glasses. I mean, we never ask people to replace them, really. We just say, just let us know, because we might miss or miscount in the cupboard and there's one less than there should be and we need to go and buy some. But more often than not, they will go and buy some and they'll replace them. So they're really good. So that's the cost, and that's the guests. Oh, we supply all the bed linen and the towels. Again, it's not always expected. People, even though it's all on the site, what's supplied and everything, and we even list all the things in the kitchen that are available, they don't always look. So we often get a message from them through Airbnb saying, do we need to bring our bed linen and towels? Which is frustrating, obviously, but it does prompt conversation with your guest, and it gives me an opportunity to have a quick chat with them, maybe ask where they're coming from, this sort of thing. And yes, and obviously, I'm always relieved, and if anything, when I look for somewhere to stay, I look to make sure there's bed linen and towels, because it's a heavy thing to carry with you, isn't it? So yeah, so they get that supplied. And sometimes they come up with bizarre questions. I can't even think of them off the top of my head, but you think, so why would you ask that? To me, the obvious things, but we're all different, and guests are all different. They're coming from all different countries, different cultures with different ways of doing things. So, you have to be prepared for anything, really. I've caught them up on the thing they're mostly not for, which is a sign of the times. They'll knock on the door and ask for the code for the Wi-Fi. Again, this is there's a folder that's always on the coffee table with all the information of the local area, local shops, and our phone numbers, and the codes for the Wi-Fi and things like that, and there's instructions for the TV. Everything, that, as far as we're concerned, if we weren't here, they should be able to get by. But they always seem to knock for it, because it's always a panic that where's the Wi-Fi code, and it's in the folder on the first page, and they always end up apologising because they haven't even thought to look of anywhere. They just thought we might tell them. I mean, you can leave the code on Airbnb, you can tell them on there, but I don't know, we just think, well, it's here, you don't need to. Maybe we could do that, but who's to know that they again would look and find it. It's like we have a code, because again, sign of the times, COVID has now made it that we can't really have that much contact with guests. So we now leave the key in a key box next to that, what we call our back door. And obviously that code we do put on there, and they'll often message us and say, well, what's the code for the key? So I end up now in the message, when I message them, just to check that everything's okay and that wish them a safe journey and everything, and I always put the code in then. So especially if they come really late and we could be in bed. So the last thing you want is knocking on the door for the code to get the key to get in. And regarding COVID, I mean, that's made it difficult for most of us people with hotels and Gites and everything, well, everybody in life basically, but it's obviously made business a bit lacking, really. We haven't had in the last 2 years as many guests as it used to get. It got to the point where the regulations came in and Airbnb started stating that there's lists of what they want to make sure, do this, for cleaning and all this sort of thing, down to the point of they were expecting you to clean the curtains. I mean, can you imagine doing that after every guest? So, I mean, if the bed linen and towels get washed anyway. So then they gave the option of do this or choose to have a 72-hour gap between guests. So being as we don't actually rely on the money from the Gite to live, it pays for all the extras, so to speak. We decided to go for that, for the 72-hour. And it does me a favour, especially because, say, where I've been ill in the last couple of years, it gives me a break. I'm not running around on one day got back-to-back bookings, things like that. It gives me that little bit of a break. And it's come down now to, they're not insisting on that, but we still insist on a 48-hour gap, because that gives us time to get our heads round, right, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. And so, yeah. But, yeah, we thought that was a bit much, them telling that. I mean, I know they see it as their place to tell you what you need to be doing, and I suppose there are people out there that don't know. And while on the subject of Airbnb, some people are going to think I'm being really picky, but people that know me and know that I've said about it before, very often people will go on holiday and come back and say, I stayed at a really lovely Airbnb. That in itself really annoys me, because Airbnb are the platform that we advertise on. They don't own the houses. They don't do all the work. We do that, and they, very lucky for us, we do get clients through them. They get a commission, yet they get the credit all the time. It's always, it's a great Airbnb, and we must choose an Airbnb. Not, let's go on Airbnb and because I have some fantastic properties, which there is, and most of us are really reasonable prices. But yeah, it's just the way it's worded. It's just me. Ignore me, I'm just grumbling. It's just, we're not an Airbnb. We advertise on Airbnb is what I'm saying. I don't know whether people do actually think that. Maybe that some people do think that Airbnb own all these places, because they don't. No. I think we've sort of come to an end of this little chat. I don't think there's much more I can tell you, really. If you can think of any questions you'd like to ask me, obviously ask me in the comments. Yeah, so I think that's about it. I will see you in the next video. If I think of anything else that I haven't told you that I know you probably need to know, I will put it in the description, or I may even just add a few text on screen when I edit this video. But otherwise, it is near Christmas. I want you to have a fantastic Christmas and a very happy 2022. It's got to be better than the last couple, hasn't it? Please just keep watching. I love knowing you're all out there, and I love our chats in the comments. And tell your friends. Hopefully in 2022 we'll have a lot more people to chat to and some more subscribers. And yeah, I wish you well. So, au revoir.